Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Vaping Thursday, where we talk about SNUS, and we have an excellent documentary lineup for you, which is a conversation with Bengt from EU for SNUS. He is one of the leaders in the world for advocating for safer, smokeless tobacco products, and specifically SNUS and nicotine pouches. But before we get into showing you the documentary, we would like to first introduce you to Nihar Dholakia, who is a harm reduction expert from India with specific insight into safer, smokeless nicotine and tobacco products. He's also the director of Dholakia Tobacco, which has been in the business of making smokeless tobacco products for a few generations. Before we get into the documentary, we will talk about snus and nicotine pouches in the context of India and how they can work for Indian smokeless tobacco users, which, as some of you might know, are actually twice the number of smokers, numbering about 200 million people. But the Indian smokeless tobacco is especially risky and leads to about 350,000 deaths a year. And so, how can safer smokeless nicotine tobacco products help alleviate this problem, and whether they can work for the Indian population? So, welcome, Nihar. Thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
First off, can you tell us what is snus and how is it safer and different from Indian and Asian smokeless tobacco products, especially Kenny, which is the most used tobacco product in India, used by about 200 million people and which causes 315,000 deaths a year. And what do you think, or what kind of scientific evidence is available which supports the safety of snus over other Indian and Asian smokeless tobacco products?
SNUS is a moist oral tobacco portion, which has significant low amounts of TSNAs. So TSNAs are a group of nitrosamines which are present in tobacco and tobacco smoke, which are carcinogens. So the entire one of the reasons why snus is less harmful is because it has lower content of TSNAs. If you look at research and data, the product originated in Sweden, and Sweden right now has the lowest tobacco mortality rate, and it has the lowest smoking population in the entire world. So, the data and science and research suggests that it has significant harm reduction benefit over any form of smokeless tobacco present. If you look at it in the Indian context, we have a wide portfolio of smokeless tobacco products. We have about 300 million tobacco consumers, but out of that, 200 million are smokeless tobacco consumers. But there's there's no quality control as such in making smokeless tobacco products in India. So there's no control of TSNAs, there's no control of the additives, and that's why the Indian smokeless is much more harmful than compared to US food. You know, if you talk about the entire process of how snus is made, the first step is selection of the right tobacco. We need to select tobaccos which have low TSNA contents. The TSNAs are part of tobacco. So the first step is selecting tobaccos which has low TSNAs in them. And the next step is pasteurization. Just how you would pasteurize your milk, for example, to kill the bacteria in it. We pasteurize the tobacco. So the entire process is about 24-hour long process. So this is one of the reasons why snus is less harmful. It's risk reduced in comparison to the Indian smokeless products that we have in India. And there has been a long-term study. If you talk about US, for example, US has made snus as a model, has claimed that snus can now be a modified risk tobacco product, which is significant. A US FDA, which is the most strict FDA on this planet, and there's a lot of science and data that has been evaluated by them to call it a modified risk tobacco product.
Why do you think snus can be an effective substitute for Indian and Asian smokeless tobacco users? What is it that would make it effective for let's say a Kenny user to switch, and also whether snus can be an effective harm reduction substitute for smokers in the country?
Well, if you look at the consumption in India, out of those 200 million smokeless tobacco users, we have about 150 million using Henny or Gutka or Mishri. And the entire action is putting something under your lip. And snooze is exactly the same. You have to put this product under your lip or behind your lip. And that's one of the reasons why I believe in this product, that it can play a significant part in risk reduction for the Indian tobacco users, because there's no change of action. It's just a simple switch, and it's a replacement. Does it work for smokers? Yes, it does work for smokers as well. But smokers, they need a completely different action. The whole habit is different. So you have to attempt to give it a try to switch. It's not like it's a different form of action altogether. But for smokeless is why I believe in India, because the burden that we have in India is not cigarettes, of course, but the larger burden that we have is of smokeless tobacco. And anything that you put under your lip and just switching it with snus, it's convenient for the consumers as well.
What do you think are the challenges, development, product development wise and scientifically, that need to be overcome to make snus work for the Indian and Asian smokeless tobacco users? To give you an example of what I mean, is it possible to make snus in a way that, let's say, users can roll it in their hand, because that hand to mouth action, this rolling action is comparable to the hand to mouth action, which is a part of the behavioral aspect of using that product. So, is there a way that we can look at it, or there are other challenges that you think that need to be overcome?
Well, I think in terms of product development, the drawback that I see in India is that we don't have too many tobaccos which has low TSNA contents, and that's one of the biggest challenge that we have in India. Uh, Making a product which suits the taste profiles of the Indian consumers, that is easy. That is not a big problem. Replacing the action of rubbing something on their hand and putting it, that is something that we need to change, and the consumers need to adapt to something more sophisticated. We're just eliminating the entire process of rolling something on your hand. So that will go away, and that is going away, and that there's a cycle of each product, and we are noticing that the rubbing on the hands is slowly disappearing now, and more people are moving towards more sophisticated use of smokeless tobacco, and pouch presents an opportunity for harm reduction, also a little more sophisticated way of consuming tobacco.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I can, even with vaping, when you make a transition, there is a change of behavior as a person starts using the product. I mean, of course, flavors is a big thing. With tobacco, with smoking, you just have that one particular kind of flavor. So initially, people do, when they make a switch, they switch with nicotine flavor or tobacco flavored liquids, but then they gradually expand the flavor profile and then try different kinds. So I think it's important that once that nicotine dependence is addressed, and once people make the switch, then they can expand from there. What exactly are nicotine pouches? Everyone is hearing about them, but tell us what exactly they are. What is the risk profile, and the risk profile compared to smoking? Compared to Indian smokeless tobacco products, and also compared to vaping. And what do you think, or who do you think is the most suited category of tobacco or nicotine users for whom they can be an effective substitution product?
So nicotine pouch are very similar to a snus, but without tobacco, but with nicotine. We often call it. It's also known as tobacco-free snus. In comparison to the risk profile, it is very similar to that of a NRT. And if we talk about NRT, is nicotine patches and nicotine gums. So it's 99% safer than any tobacco product out there on the market at the moment. There's no combustion. So the main killer is the combustion. So cigarettes, if we compare nicotine pouch to a cigarette, we don't have combustion there, and just the easiest intake of nicotine and the safest way that one can consume nicotine. So risk profile is very well compared to that of a nicotine gum. And yes, it is very widely used in the West by smokers, not just by smokeless tobacco users.
Can you show us these two, snus and nicotine pouch, so we can, our viewers can see what they are and what is the difference between them? And can you tell us who are the, for whom which product could work?
Right. So this is a nicotine pouch, which is completely white in color. It doesn't have any tobacco in it. And the filler that we have is plant fiber. So nicotine is attached with the plant fiber to deliver flavor. And this is a snus product. So it has tobacco in it. You can see it's way identical. It's just the color difference that it has. So for smokers, I think nicotine pouch is very much suitable. And for any smokeless tobacco users, a snus risk-reduced oral pouch would be much more suitable.
So is snus readily available in the country? I mean, can people find it?
Not really, to be honest, because most of the Indian guys who call it snooze, it's not technically snooze. It's a filter Kenny. So you cannot differentiate between a filter Kenny and a snooze. So it has to come from responsible companies, promoting the products and promoting the brands. So they need to be responsible. They need to be offering the right sort of risk profiles to the consumers. But the good thing is that adaptation, people are adapting to the pouches. So which is important thing. So which becomes easier for snooze to be replaced or used by the consumers in India. So sophistication is coming. Everybody wants to be more sophisticated in terms of use. So we are seeing that at the moment, and there's a lot of pouches that are being sold in India at the moment. But not every pouch is a snooze product.
So yes, some people are marketing filter Kenny as snus, which is not. I mean, what is the difference? I mean, how do you? What is the difference between filter Kenny and snus?
So filter candy is made exactly the way a candy is made. There's no pasteurization involved. There's no The tobaccos are not low TSNAs. So that's one of the big differences. Everything comes down to the tobacco. The tobacco, the TSNAs are a part of the tobacco. So you need to select your tobacco very specifically with low TSNAs. And the process of pasteurization is also very important. So if you're not doing both these parts right, you cannot call your product a snooze. You can only call it a filter Kenny. So this is the harm reduction angle. This is where the quality control and harm reduction is put into a product.
So as you know, India has a wide range of tobacco products. It has a spectrum, and which makes the challenge of developing safer alternatives uh, a big one. So, smokers, in fact, are a smaller component of the larger, I mean, the overall tobacco use in the country. BDs are the most used product, but they are still pale in comparison to the number of people who use smokeless tobacco products. In smokeless tobacco products, also there is a huge variety, right? Depending on the region you are, there are different kind of products being used, different flavors, different ways of preparing it, different ways of taking it. Uh, and I want to focus on a specific category of users, the ones who use tobacco with betel nut. Now, it's used in many forms. It's part of pan, it's gutka, which is banned in many states, but however, it's still freely available. And people have gotten around to around the current laws, and you can still find it everywhere. In the Northeast, it's directly consumed with betel nut. So my question is, do you think in the future will it be possible to develop a product? Now, we know snus addresses nicotine dependence, so it could be very well adopted by Kenny users. But what about people who use tobacco with betel nut? Because betel nut also has dependence properties, right? It's also an addictive substance. So, how can products be addressed to that demographic? And what kind of innovation would it take to get there?
Right. So gutka and pan masala are usually chewed, and snus and kenny are usually dip forms of consuming nicotine or delivering nicotine. It's just like it's gonna be difficult for any smoker to consume snus. It's gonna be as difficult as for a gutka or a pan masala user to switch to snus, because we need to replicate the whole chewing aspect, the action of consumption. It is quite possible to have a risk reduced product in that category as well, but it's in the making. It's going to take a bit amount of years to come out, but there is a certain possibility of such product coming out in the next few years for sure.
So, as you know, flavors have become a hot button issue in the West. Uh, with claims that flavors attract kids. Of course, there are a lot of holes in that theory because it's not like adults flavors don't attract adults, right? One of the reasons why a lot of people are stage switch out of smoking is because it gives them a choice. It gives them a way to address their palate. So it is an enjoyable experience. So that is the reason why they have switched, and perhaps one of the reasons why nicotine gums don't work. Though now they're also launching nicotine gums in flavors, right? So everyone does understand that flavors are important. What I want to ask you is how important are flavors in smokeless tobacco products, in snus products, in nicotine pouch products? Do they have the same kind of importance that they have for vaping products, or is it even more important? I could imagine more because it is something which you directly put in your mouth. But tell us what you think.
I think flavors play a big part in the entire harm reduction. It's very important for anybody who's willing to switch to have flavors. If we talk about India, yes, the Indian palate is much more different than the West. We don't have too many chewing Kenny or dip tobacco with flavors, but we have a lot of flavors in chewing tobacco, and which is very specific to floral and spice, etc., etc. So yes, I think if we want anybody to switch to a risk-reduced alternative, flavors are going to play a big role, and we need to deliver them products with similar taste profiles so that it becomes way easier for them to switch. So in the long run, I think flavors are gonna play a very pivotal role in enabling, helping people to switch to safer alternatives.
Thank you, Nihar. I was in Delhi a few months back and happened to come across someone working in the tobacco control field. Uh, and already, there is, noises coming from that section that, snus comes in flavors, nicotine pouches come in flavors, they will attract kids. And that is their central reason for opposing them. So the harm reduction aspect gets buried in the fact that they could be appealing to kids. How do you address a concern like that?
Responsible marketing and responsible distribution is going to be a big thing in the next 5 to 10 years. With what has happened in the US, we don't want any products or any risk reduced products to go the same way. Uh, so first, the companies who are selling the products needs to be completely responsible, and second, sure, we won't do fruity flavors or flavors which are attracted to the kids, but we can do a lot of other flavors which are not quite attractive for the kids, like traditional smokeless tobacco flavors. So that and mint is something which is very common, and mint is very appreciated by the Indian smokeless tobacco users as well. So I think there is going to be a certain segment of consumers and who are going to opt for such products. But at the end of the day, it comes to responsible marketing and responsible distribution and selling. So that's where the companies themselves have to be very careful, and they have to make it right. They cannot go out and sell to kids.
India, as you know, is a major producer of tobacco. Do you think we have the capability to manufacture and distribute safer nicotine products, be it in smokeless or in vaping, and be a leader in this field in the future? Because we already have that large production. Do you think that production can be transformed or converted? Because right now, the tobacco is being made for the most harmful products. It's being made for it's been grown for tobacco or for smoking, for smokeless tobacco products which are quite harmful. So do you think in the future India can lead this transformation, transform and lead this whole movement for transition to lower, safer nicotine products?
Absolutely. I think, India is the second largest grower of tobacco. It is the largest extractor of nicotine in the world. So we have everything that it takes for India to lead in this safer product, making safer alternatives for the world. We could be a global leader, but there has to be a certain knowledge, awareness, recognition of such products, and you know, come from the government. We need support from the government to do so. There has to be support for the farmers. There has to be support for the nicotine extractors. There has to be some sort of regulation put into place for making safer alternatives. There has to be science, research, data that has to be started because we are at least 10, 15 years back. If you look at Sweden, if you look at US, they are 10, 15 years ahead. And, India has everything to be the global leader in this particular segment. We're just not utilizing it. That's what I think. We have the tobaccos. Most of the tobaccos that are used by Swedish companies are exported. Most of the nicotine that is used in vapes or in nicotine pouches is exported from India. So we have everything, but we're not utilizing it. Not even for our home market. So we are very well placed to be a global leader in safer alternatives for the world.
To dig a little deeper into that, Nihar, so what kind of, let's imagine that you had policy control, or you had a way you could shape how this thing pans out. What are the few steps, or what are the few initial steps that you would take uh, on this journey to transformation, which will also give us an insight into what is needed for this transformation to take place?
Well, I won't talk from the base, but I can tell you there's no such regulatory authority governing what is put in a tobacco product. So we need somebody to regulate this entire production process of a tobacco product. That's where, like FDA, for example, in the US, you need, if you want to sell a tobacco product, you need to submit all your data, all your scientific research to the FDA to be able to sell that product in the US. We don't have that landscape in India at the moment. So the most important thing right now for us to have a regulating body who regulates the manufacturing of tobacco. What's being put, what should not be put, what are the limits on tobacco products. This is the start. If we start doing this, I think we'll come to a point where any tobacco manufacturer in India will be able to provide a risk reduced alternative. So this is the most important thing right now for us in India. you know, any licensing is also very important. We don't have any licensing in India, for example. You can just get a GST number, you can register with excise, and you can start manufacturing tobacco products. That's not how it is done in the US or in Europe or in any place in Sweden, for example. You cannot do that. So there's a whole approval process, the product approval process that a company has to go through to be able to market that product. So I think that's the one thing that we lack in India, and if we take control of that, I think we can offer products which are risk reduced, of course, and which are controlled.
If such a standard was put into place, and let's look at the Indian landscape, and then see if it's possible to do something like this. So most of these players, or most of these manufacturers, are small time players, right? They're cottage industries, and will they be able to comply? I mean, laws are good if they can be implemented, right? If they are good for the region for which they govern. So, do you think they will have? Is it possible for them to comply with these standards? Now, this as a uh, person from the industry, you would know better. I mean, so if manufacturing standards were put in place, in short, do you think it could be effective, could be implemented such that these small players could then abide by these standards? And what kind of monitoring mechanism would be needed? Do you think it's feasible practically to do something like this in a country like India?
We have to look at the larger picture. The larger picture is to be able to offer safer smokeless tobacco products. Not everybody is going to be able. Not everybody is going to be willing to, or are will be able to comply with the standards. So it has to be forced. you cannot say the smaller guys won't be able to comply with it, so we cannot implement it. We have to look at the larger picture. We have to look at the 300 million tobacco users that we have in our country. So I think it's not going to be possible for everybody to comply of to the manufacturing standards, to the technology. Not everybody has access to the technology as well. So only the guys who can manufacture to the standards are going to remain in the market, which is also good because the consumers can get the right quality of products. They cannot, you know, right now the Indian market is as such cheaper. जो सबसे सस्ता है वो बिकता है. That's how, because of the, we have about 200% taxation on tobacco products. It's not, the taxation ideally should be compared to the, based on the risk profile of the tobacco products. So I don't think everybody will be able to comply to this manufacturing standards. But if they want to be in the market, if they want to be able to still manufacture it, they will have no choice but to comply with the manufacturing standards. I think that's when the whole revolution of quality tobacco products would come in India.
How do you see the safer smokeless tobacco market in India panning out in the immediate future? Let's say in a year, year out from now or 2 years out from now, what kind of changes do you expect to see, or some things that are already happening and will become bigger?
I think the smokeless tobacco market in India it's the most complex market on this planet, to be honest, because we work in the US, we work in Europe, and the Indian tobacco market is very weird. What is happening right now is that people are moving towards oral pouches. People are, they don't want to put tobacco on their palm, rub it, and put it under their lip. So that certain change is coming into the market, which means that a product like snus can be easily adapted in the Indian market. With with regards to chewing, there's no alternative yet, but we think an alternative would come out in the next 1 or 2 years, and that would work best for the chewing segment as well. And I think the tax burden is as such. The purchasing power is low in our country, and that's one of the reasons why safer alternatives are being killed in the entire industry, in the entire country. I think taxation needs to go down a bit. It needs to be risk relative taxation. Once that is put into place, I think we could be a global example of harm reduction for the entire world. That's what I think. But so far adaptation, a lot of people are moving towards snooze, which is a very good thing. That's what we see.
Any final thoughts on what you would have to say to the policymakers, to the scientific community, and tobacco users before we wind up?
Well, what I would suggest the policymakers is to look at it from a harm reduction angle. And start research, get data, and put regulation behind tobacco products in India. Because I think that's, we don't have any research, we don't have any data, we don't have infrastructure to test tobacco products in India. So it's very important to set up labs to test tobacco in India. For tobacco users, I would say, opt for what works for you. Always opt for risk reduce. There are a lot of risk reduce alternatives available in the market right now. Go out, do your own research, and then opt for it. That's my honest, suggestion and opinion, because you cannot enforce anybody to switch or opt for a risk reduced profile. But once they have their own awareness, they have done their own research, it becomes much more simple for them and easier for them to adapt.
Hello, everybody. This is Bengt Wiberg from Sweden, and it's about to snow today, they say. It's rather cold here up in Sweden. Thank you very much for inviting me to this session. We are going to talk about snus, nicotine pouches. What is the difference? We're going to talk about flavors in greatly harm-reduced products, such as e-cigarettes, heat-not-burn, snus, nicotine pouches. And I'm going to explain the Swedish experience of snus. Should I speak louder? Can you hear me better now? Fixing the technicalities. Can somebody put in the text box if you can hear me well now? Thank you. Thank you very much. So, who am I? I am an MBA, an economist from Linköping University who some years ago resigned from my post to become an inventor. I'm also the founder of the EU for Snus movement. We have members from more than 100 nations, all adult men and women nicotine users. And we did a survey with hundreds of replies on the EU for Snus Facebook group. And as it turned out, more than 80% of us are former smokers who has quit smoking for good with snus. Or, wow, nicotine pouches. I will explain the difference in a moment. So the EU for Snus movement, we are a international crowd consumer movement. There's no employees, and I'm not the director, as somebody mentioned here in the introduction. I'm one of the founders of EU for Snus, and we are on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, and LinkedIn. I might have forgotten somebody. So we want to see an end to the European Union snus ban. And we would like to see snus becoming more well known in the rest of the world. Today, we have about more than 10% of the adult population in Sweden. I think it's actually around 17% of all persons who are allowed to vote in Sweden are using snus. And what has happened in Sweden is that we more or less quit smoking, and I will show this in a moment. But first of all, let's take a 1-minute video and present some of my moderators in the EU for snus. Just hang on there. See if I can do this. Chrome. Here we go. Turn up the volume, because on Fender Stratocaster drums and bass and vocals is Jimmy D from Germany, and the lyrics, I wrote them myself. Revolution, baby. We were married at small. One stop for you. Next to the use of skills. We want the right to choose. Next to the use of Here we go again. Stop screen. Oh, can you hear me? Did you like the music? Come on. Put something up on the notes beside you. So, what is Swedish snus? Well, it started about 250 years ago. And the first snus was loose snus. I don't know if you can see. Now I spilled some snus on my keyboard, but it's loose snus. You grab between your fingers and you press a little ball that you place on your upper lip. Then about 50 years ago, the first portion snus came out. It looks like a little tea bag that you place under your upper or lower lip. It doesn't matter really because it's totally spit free, and it gives you the nicotine that you need. And like I said, EU for snus members, more than 80% of us have quit smoking for good by help of snus. So what are the ingredients in snus? It's grained tobacco, which is air cured, and that is pasteurized, in difference to the US moist snuff, which is normally fire cured. And the pasteurization kills bacteria. And besides grained tobacco, there's a high water content. Some used to say it's the most expensive water on the planet because we have a snus tax in Sweden, which is quite high. It's about $60 per kilo. And the water content is normally around 40-45%. Then we have salt, sometimes flavors. Snus comes in many flavors. pH adjusters, and that is about that. Snus was invented, like I said, 250 years ago in Sweden, and in the 1800s it emigrated to America. So, nicotine pouches. There's a lot of brands of nicotine pouches, but they more or less look like this. Still the same tea bag. You can put it on under your underlip or upper lip. So I'll pop in. I know I already have a snus, but why not put in one more? So it is used in the exact same way as snus, but the content in the pouch has no tobacco leaf whatsoever. The filler, let's say everything else is the same. We have water in nicotine pouches, we have salt, we have flavors, we have pH adjusters, but the filler is plant fibers from the plant kingdom instead of tobacco leaf. Yeah, let me say, I will save the last 15 minutes for any questions that you might have, which I would be very happy to answer. So we are here today because there is a World Health Organization conferences of the parties going on this week. It's completely secret. There is no journalists invited. There is no nicotine consumers organizations invited. And I know for a fact that just at this moment, INCO, the International Network on Nicotine Consumers Organization, is staging a rally or a peaceful demonstration outside the Bloomberg office in London. Good luck to all of you in INCO. Then we have the European Tobacco Harm Reduction Advocates, or are also very active organization, and EU for Snus is a member of both these umbrella consumer organizations, and we have no funding whatsoever. But let's say people talk about vaping is obviously much bigger than snus and nicotine pouches right now. But what joins us? Several things. We all enjoy nicotine in a safer form, and say most of us are former smokers who have switched to much lower, less harmful products. So I'm going to show you a little video. Thank you, by the way, Professor Mareva Glover, who just spoke before me. And I have a little video here about flavors in e-cigs, heat not burn, snus, nicotine pouches, featuring Professor Mareva Glover. So let's try to show it. It's a 2.5-minute video. Share screen. Bear with me. I'm an old guy. I'm 64 years old. Let's see. Flavors in snus. Here we go. Hope you can see it. A very immediate question that involves actually the whole world, and that is flavors. How can availability of different choices of flavors in e-cigs and snus, for example, contribute to more people managing to smoke?
Yeah. So one of the issues is that smoking tobacco, that has been the most sort of dependency forming way of using nicotine. When people switch to vaping and heat not burn, and heat not burn is a good example because it is weaker. It's weaker. And I've just been to Japan, and for people switching over from smoking, some people find the heat not burn is not as good. So one of the users said to us that what he did, he switched to a mint flavored heat stick. He didn't used to smoke menthol. He switched to mint, and that helped and kind of compensated a bit for the weakness of the new product. So it's the flavor adds another aspect to the more aspects you have, the opening the packet, the hand-to-mouth movements, the sensory aspects, and the flavor. It adds.
And your scent.
Yes, the smell and the taste. It adds to the experience. And if something has less experience, less reward, and is weaker than smoking tobacco, it's important to help people switching over that. The flavour is incredibly important. I'm totally against banning the flavours.
Right.
In tobacco, in this heat not burns, snus or vaping, that would be another thing that would undermine the success of people switching over.
And the success rate would most definitely be affected, I guess. Yeah. And if we are modern people, we are normally used to having a variety of everything. So I'm back again. Stop sharing screen. Here we go again. I hope you enjoyed Professor Mareva Glover's view.
and I think all of us views on flavors. And the video was also featuring my good friend Eric Atakan Befritz, who is now in London. Yes, I'm going to share something else. In the end of September, I was invited as a panelist and a speaker at the No Smoke Summit. And I was very happy for this because here we had, for example, several worldwide known cardiologists and one of the foremost experts on snus in the world. Let me try to show you the slide. Share screen. Chrome link. Here we go. And present. I hope you can hear me also. Show present. Hope you can see this from the beginning. So here you have a graph with data from the European Union Eurobarometer 2021, and it shows the smoking prevalence among 15 to 24-year-old. You know, the WHO and the EU anti-nicotine organizations, they're always talking about young people. Don't lure young people into smoking. And look at this diagram. The average in the European Union is above 20% daily smoking for 15 to 24 years old. But look far down in the left, Sweden, only 3% of young people between 15 and 24 is using snus. That's not the end of it. Look to the far left, Norway, 2%. So tobacco consumption in Sweden is about the same as the EU average if you measure by kilo or volume. But the Swedish tobacco mortality and the cancer rates, lung cancers, oral cancers, cardiovascular diseases, COP, and all these smoking related sicknesses, cancers, are the lowest in the European Union. And this is mainly because in Sweden, and as you can see in Norway, in Iceland, we are using snus and nicotine pouches instead of smoking. At this event, end of September, I was commenting on the European Beating Cancer Plan, the BECA. And what is symptomatic here is that in this BECA plan, they are talking about 40% of cancer cases in EU are preventable, such as cancers caused by smoking. I couldn't agree more. But then they start talking about tobacco consumption continues to be the leading cause of preventable cancer. So you go from smoking to tobacco, which includes snus. And then the conclusion is through rigorous enforcement, including stricter rules on novel nicotine products, like nicotine pouches, like heat not burn, like e-cigarettes. And then all of a sudden, from smoking, which is the biggest cause of all cancers and tobacco mortality, to tobacco, which includes snus, nicotine pouches, and anything has to do with nicotine. And the European Beating Cancer Plan also says we will use the remarkable potential of new technologies and scientific progress to reduce cancers in EU. And what do we have here? Here is a scientific study that came in 2020 by Merck, etc. You have the reference below. And this is the relative risk hierarchy of 13 nicotine products. To the far left, you have combustible cigarettes. And what do we have here? We have, if you look to the far right, you have snus, you have electronic cigarettes, you have non-tobacco pouches, you have nicotine replacement therapy, which is nicotine gums, nicotine patches, nicotine lozenges, and all kinds of fruity flavors. And then you have 0% risk, and that is non-use whatsoever. And as you can see, in this study, they place, for example, nicotine pouches at 0.22% the risk of smoking cigarettes. I highlighted these new innovations which greatly reduce risk. There's lots of big data in regards to the relative risk of snus. In 2017, The Lancet published the Global Burden of Disease study, which is the biggest metadata study that has ever been performed. And what they have done basically is to collect all scientific publications for the past 26 years. And the conclusion is that Swedish type of snus, as well as snuff, nasal snuff, had no higher relative risk than 1.0 for any health outcome. I know that not all of you perhaps know what is the meaning of relative risk. But a Swedish professor, Stefan Willers, published this quote in the Swedish Medical Journal in October 2018. A recent large epidemiological study could not demonstrate any increased risk of disease with Swedish snus. Snus is something you put under your lip. Upper or lower lip doesn't matter. So shouldn't there be a higher risk for oral cancer when using Swedish snus? No. The Karolinska Institute. In Sweden, we do have databases which are extremely large and covering some 30 years of data collection. And in May 2020, the Karolinska Institute, they are the organization that every year awards who gets the Nobel Prize in medicine. And the conclusion was that compared to never snus use, ever snus user was not associated with oral cancer. And this is a pretty large cohort, I mean number of people. 418,000 male participants, corresponding to 9.2 million person years. And what is not explained in this slide is that when consuming 4 cans of snus, each can holds 20 pouches or less per week. The scientific conclusion was that you have 35% lower relative risk of getting oral cancer than persons not using snus at all. So the data is quite convincing. So my conclusion to this European Beating Cancer Plan is that they refuse to acknowledged the great disparity in risk between combustible and non-combustible nicotine products. And why invent the wheel? We have 50 years of science on Swedish snus. And we have the Swedish experience and now also the Norwegian experience, as well as the Icelandic experience of snus, with record low smoking caused cancers and mortality. So we leave this slide just a moment, bear with me. I'll be right back to you. Stop screen. Here we go again. I hope you found that interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about the European Union. In 1992, the European Union banned Swedish snus. What is still allowed in the European Union is chew bags. They look exactly like snus, but they contain cut snus tobacco instead of grained snus tobacco. You're supposed to chew them in your mouth. So we have chew bags from North Africa, from Asia, some with very dangerous content. Those are allowed in the European, but snus is not. I was invited by the New Nicotine Alliance of UK to participate in the snus trial here in Luxembourg in January 2018. So I was able, together with loads of visitors, to hear the European Union argument against snus. One European Union lawyer said that snus had nothing to do at all with the fact that Swedish men in particular had stopped smoking. It had to do with Swedish men's healthy living style. I don't think so. Another EU lawyer said it has to do with Swedish men's paternity leave. Sweden has such generous rules on paternity leave that that is the fact why Swedish men has stopped smoking. And this is, of course, totally rubbish. There is no such studies. And besides, according to the latest statistics, 70% of the paternity leave is taken out by Swedish women, and you can spread it over 12 years. So we want to see an end, and from EU, and for the 100 million daily smokers in the European Union could have so much use of the Swedish experience of snus. I would like to mention also ETHRA, European Tobacco Harm Reduction Advocates. They made a big survey, probably the biggest survey on nicotine users in the world. Some 35,000 nicotine users answered this big survey. And if I remember correctly, I think about over 60% of those who are using cigarettes for their nicotine. Of those 61%, 31% would be willing to try snus or nicotine pouches in order to help them quit smoking if it was available. Now, 31% of 100 million, bad with the mathematics right now, but it comes to some 10-12 million daily smokers in the European Union who would be willing to try snus if it was available. So this is a big shame, and therefore I'm going to show you a video featuring Konstantinos Farsalinos, Brad Rodo, Gary Stimson, Ricardo Polosa, and Mareva Glover, and some other persons. This video is about 8 minutes long, and I hope you enjoy it. Hang on. Chrome link.
Hi everyone. I'm holding in my hand pack, let's call it, of SNUS. This represents one of the biggest public health scandals that we have seen in the European Union, which was further ascertained through the latest European Court decision, which claimed that the reduction in smoking rates in Swedish men was caused by the paternity leave law that was implemented a few years ago. SNUS has been life-saving in Scandinavia. It has almost eliminated smoking rates, and it has resulted in the lowest death rates from cardiovascular, lung disease, and lung cancer in Sweden compared to any other country in the European Union, and including oral cancers, because we have to also say that just because SNUS is an oral product. It can be a life-saving product in several countries, including, for example, India, where rates of oral cancer are higher than the rates of lung cancer because of the use of very harmful oral tobacco products. SNUS should be available in every country where tobacco cigarettes are sold legally with the signature of the state in terms of the excise tax, because every smoker has the right to access a less harmful alternative to smoking. And that's a human right. That's not a consumer right. That's a human right. We're not talking about consumer choice. We're not talking about consumer freedom. We're talking about a human right to have access to a product that will improve health.
Thank you,
That's
Dr. Konstantinos Farsalinos
Thank you very much.
of Greece. Thank you.
Radu. I'm a professor at the University of Louisville in the States, and I hope that the Swedish experience can be extended to the rest of the European Union.
Thank you very much, Professor Rudu.
Stand up for EU for SNUS. The ban on SNUS in the EU is scandalous. Many of you will know we tried to challenge that legally and it was thrown back by the European Court of Justice, but we really do have to overturn the ban on SNUS. The UK is still just in the European Union, so I'm very pleased to be able to say that I'm standing up for EU for SNUS. If the UK leaves, we will fight the battle in the UK independently.
Go UK.
Could you tell the viewers who you are and your background?
I'm Jerry Stimson. I don't use SNUS, I don't vape, but I'm very supportive of people who want to use SNUS or want to vape in order to switch from smoking. And SNUS, I think, is going to be the magic bullet. Across Europe, we've got a lot of people who are using e-cigarettes, but they don't work for everybody. So SNUS has to be added into the mix to help people switch away from smoking.
Thank you very much, Professor Gary Stimson.
Hello, I'm Mariwa Glover. I'm from New Zealand and I'm the director of the Centre of Research Excellence. And my focus is on Indigenous sovereignty and smoking. I've been lobbying actually in New Zealand for a very long time for our smokers there to have access to SNUS. And the government is still claiming that SNUS is illegal, but in actual fact, the law is not that clear. So New Zealand is about to put out draft legislation, and I believe that there is a threat that they may make it very clear they're going to make SNUS illegal. So we need help in New Zealand, people to support us in lobbying government to make this available, or at least let New Zealand smokers also have access to SNUS And also the tax needs to be changed because they're taxing it at the same rate as cigarettes, which in New Zealand is very, very high.
Where would you place the risk of, you heard Brad Rodo just now.
So I'd like to see taxation on tobacco products and nicotine products according to relative risk. And Swedish SNUS, well, if we're going to have no tax on vaping, which is the current suggestion, then I think there should be no tax on Swedish SNUS because it's as or more reduced risk than even vaping is.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you.
I'm Professor Riccardo Colosa, the director of the Center of Excellence for the Acceleration of Harm Reduction. Today I would like to give my opinion about SNUS. SNUS is a nicotine-free product which contains nicotine. It's being largely used in Scandinavian countries with phenomenal results in terms of public health. In fact, Swedish users have half of the prevalence of cardiovascular disease and lung cancer compared to their citizens in Europe. SNUS can make a big difference in terms of public health, and it can be part of assorted tobacco harm reduction tool armamentarium, even in Italy, if we can make it with the pizza taste.
Great.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Harry Shapiro, and I wear three hats. I'm involved in tobacco harm reduction as the author of the Global State Tobacco Harm Reduction Report, gsthr.org, if you want to go and have a look at it. I also work in the drugs field in the UK, and my third hat is to be the author of various rock books, including Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, and Bruce. I'm also here to tell you very briefly about SNUS, which interestingly is tobacco harm reduction in action for about the last 200 years with a huge evidence base. And I think SNUS actually gets a bit ignored. All the talk seems to be of e-cigarettes and heat-not-burn. But let's not forget about SNUS as a very effective alternative to smoking cigarettes.
Thank you very much.
All listeners, I'm sure Morgan, this is SNUS. It's an oral smokeless tobacco product. It's also available in no tobacco.
Oh, I'm back again. Let's see here. We closed that one, and here I am. There's another fact about snus that actually Professor Brad Rodo of the University of Louisville in the United States was telling us. And the fact is that Sweden is probably the only country on the planet where male smoking is less frequent than female smoking. And Brad Rodo told me that the only really great thing that Swedish men can teach Swedish women is their habit of what products they use for their nicotine. In all other countries, I think like in China, there's a smoking prevalence of 50% among men and only 2-3% among Chinese women. I'm going to show my last video. It's about 5 minutes long, and it shows how outrageous these anti-all nicotine tobacco crusaders are willing to go. Here, me and Atakan Befritz of the New Nicotine Alliance Sweden visits a doctor thesis presentation at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. And one of the professors actually suggested that it's too bad that you cannot mark scientists who believe in tobacco harm reduction with a red star. Hear it out.
Hi, friends of snus and e-cigarettes and tobacco harm reduction. I'm Bengt Wiberg, representing EU for Snus.
And I'm Atakan Befritz, representing INCO and NNA Sweden.
We just came out from a very interesting seminar where a doctor presented his thesis on
vascular effects of snus and electronic cigarettes at the Danderyd Sjukhus Hospital in Stockholm under the auspices of the Karolinska Institute.
The most amazing part of this show, which you will see later on a video, is that the conclusions drawn on this study on vascular is that, I'm quoting now the doctor, e-cigarettes and snus should therefore not be considered as harmless recreational products.
Which means, to the best of our understanding, that as that is a clear-cut premise of the whole discussion part of his thesis on his 5 papers, is that we are saying it is a harmless product. You are saying it is a harmless product. Industry is saying it is a harmless product. And scientists who agree with us are saying it is a harmless form of nicotine use. To the best of my knowledge, none of the people I have met over my 12 years in tobacco harm reduction advocacy have ever used the word harmless. It's not harmless, it's vastly harm reduced.
Yeah. Royal College of Physicians in London concluded that e-cigarettes and snus are probably more than 95% less harmful than smoking cigarettes.
Snus, on the other hand, given the epidemiology that we do have in Sweden, over 120 years of over 10% adult male lifelong exclusive snus use, is that snus will fall somewhere in the 98 to 99.9% harm reduced category.
So more reports will come from this 3-hour seminar and discussion. And by the way, who said something about branding people with a red star?
Oh yes, Gunilla Bolinder, in one of her questions that was very heavily regarding conflicts of interest and machinations from industry and so forth and so on, actually said to the audience in the room that it's too bad that they cannot mark us with a red star. And those of us with a little bit of knowledge of history hear and see very disgusting parallels in hearing a prominent scientist use that kind of language. That is completely unacceptable.
Yeah, there was the yellow stars.
Could have been that.
For example.
One thing we did ask was that in the discussion part of the thesis, there is also quoted that the majority of e-cig is sold and made by the tobacco industry. We asked that is not consistent with the data we have, or Wells Fargo, or anybody else who is very good at those things, because it's less than 20%.
And the doctor who wrote the thesis, he was also asked by someone in the panel group, was Hans Gilliam of Tobacco Fact.
So yes, Tobacco Facts and Emeritus Tobacco Control Professor.
He asked,
who should be responsible if you introduce a new consumer product like this one, e-cigarettes? Who, in your opinion, would be responsible to show the evidence that this is a safe product for, say, 20 or 30 years, as we have seen tobacco smoking as an example?
Anyways, here's Atakan Befritz, Bengt Wiberg, outside the Danderyd Hospital, and we hope you support #EU for Snus and liberty for all men and women. 1.2 billion people are smoking today at a cost for the world society of $2 trillion and 6 million dead annually.
and we are reporting from the bike shed.
Yes.
You have also in your reference list, a lot of people that have interests or conflicts with the tobacco industry. And that's very hard because you cannot mark them with a red star or something like that. But they do exist in it. And they are working hard now on the harm reduction model.
Yes.
You just touched on that. But this is a huge problem because we should, as scientists, be more interested in the comparison between non-users of a drug and user of a drug, not the ones that have the worst side of exposure, but you must always compare with the non-users.
I completely agree.
So,
let me get back to you. I hope we have some listeners and viewers. Oh, I didn't show it as full screen. Very sorry for that. I hope you were able to see it anyway. So we talked about snus, we talked about nicotine pouches, we have talked about e-cigarettes, heat not burn. We have talked about the importance of flavors in all of these products in order to attract more smokers to switch to lower risk products. And all this talk about banning flavors and only allowing tobacco flavors. I mean, in e-cigarettes and nicotine pouches, there is no tobacco. What is a tobacco flavor? And would you, for example, what if you banned all the flavors in alcohol? Who would drink? They would all taste like water. Is that a good idea? Nicotine, according to the science, is not the cause of any cancers. Nicotine is something for adults, and in particular to help smokers go down the risk continuum and reduce their risk. I enjoy nicotine. I'm a former smoker. I smoked for many years, and I completely switched away from smoking thanks to snus, nicotine pouches, and when I have a even bigger nicotine need, I have a vaping device as well. Perhaps Saturdays enjoying a beer, a snus, and some vape. What else what have I forgotten? Yeah, why not bring up FDA tobacco? In 2017, I was invited to the Global Tobacco and Nicotine Forum in New York. Besides receiving an award for most exciting newcomer to the industry for my innovation of a completely different pouch, I also were able to interview Director Mitch Seller, the director of FDA Tobacco. And I asked him, what is your opinion about the Swedish experience of snus and how this has helped Sweden have the lowest cancer rates of lung cancer and cardiovascular diseases in Europe? And Mitch Seller replied there. Some people said it was the first time in history that FDA actually acknowledged something being less harmful than cigarettes. And he said, FDA absolutely understands the Swedish experience of snus. Because of the epidemiology, we have a whole nation with epidemiological data supporting that snus is less harmful. And just a couple of years ago, 8 brands of snus were approved as the first ever in history, in FDA history, modified risk tobacco products. And since then, IQOS, the heat not burn device, has also received this, and also several e-cigarette brands. So now I would say FDA has shown the way, while the European Union and anti-all crusaders, tobacco control crusaders, are still resisting. United Kingdom has now made Brexit, and we're very hopeful that they will review the science on snus and also allow it in the United Kingdom as yet another formidable product of lower risk nicotine besides vaping in England. Nicotine pouches are allowed in the United Kingdom, but not snus containing tobacco, unfortunately. So UK government officials, if you are listening, please consider snus and look at the Swedish experience and the Norwegian experience on how the Nordic Viking countries have almost quit smoking totally. Let's see if I can find any questions. I wonder if I have to go into YouTube to see those. I forgot to show one video. It's a video that has been viewed 16,000 times on YouTube. It's very short, it's 3 minutes. And the video is called "How Dangerous is Snus Compared to Smoking?" Hope you enjoy it. Share. Stop screen. Oh, what did I do? Share screen, Chrome link.
For those who doesn't know, how dangerous is snus compared to smoking, would you say, in your scientific opinion?
There is a very, very important difference in health risks. The most modern medical research has actually ended up by saying that snus does not cause oral cancer. It does not cause cardiovascular disease. The cardiovascular risks are close to negligible in the case of snus. And speaking of lung cancer, it's quite obvious that there is no risk at all, since snus doesn't reach the lungs. And the same thing for the airways and the neck. And that means that the chronic obstructive lung disease, which is one of the major smoking-related causes of death, has zero risk for snus.
If I draw behind you, there is a scale from 0% to 100%
risk for life and serious health problems. Where would you put snus on this scale, in your opinion?
Somewhere here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I think it's important to notice that the estimated risk point is so much closer to the zero end than to the 100%. There are so many sources of so-called facts that say, okay, snus risk is smaller than the risk of smoking, but there is still a risk. But that kind of wording sounds like that cutoff point being located quite close to the 100% end of the scale.
Yes.
So I think it's important to notice the exact location of that point.
Oh, stop screen. Oh, stop. Oh, what did I do? I don't know if you can hear me. My time is almost up. It's 3 minutes to 12 o'clock Swedish time. I thank you for viewing and listening. And be safe out there. There are safer nicotine alternatives. And don't be ashamed if you are a user of nicotine. Just try to use the lower risk ones. Thank you very much. And over and out from Bengt Wiberg, EU for Snus.
So that is the $64,000 question. Do e-cigarettes help people quit smoking?
Yeah, and absolutely. What the evidence we found so far suggests that they can indeed help people stop smoking.
If asking your mate down the pub about vaping, here's what they'd probably say. No one agrees if it's safer or not, so you might as well smoke anyway. Now what your mate needs is a Cochrane review. All the facts have been checked at least twice. They'd find there's a lot that the experts agree on and might give you different advice.
The question isn't really whether or not they're safer than smoking, because at this point, kind of broad scientific consensus is that absolutely they are. The question is, how do we regulate them effectively?
Now a cigarette burns with a horrible heat, making all sorts of stuff to suck through, like arsenic, cyanide and carcinogens, which is why it will kill 1 in 2. But with e-cigarettes it may look like you're smoking, but vapor and smoke are the same. Vapor's just what you get when you warm liquid, when there's poison that comes from the flame. If you're thinking of switching to vaping, do it! That's what the experts agree. Smoking's so bad for you, they all concur that vaping beats burning, but there's much to learn of effects long term yet to be seen. The Cochrane reviewers are a methodical bunch, checking evidence with meticulous care, reading hundreds of papers, comparing them all, so they have the facts ready to share. Well, the vaping review screened a paper or two. Well, 1,700 or so. 11,400 participants studied. That's why they can say that they know. If you're thinking of switching to vaping, do it! That's what the experts agree. Smoking so bad for you, they all concur that vaping beats burning, but there's much to learn of effects long-term yet to be seen. So next time down the pub when you're offered a smoke, here's what you can say to your friend. Switching to vaping is safer than smoking, may help you quit in the end. But remember to mention the findings we have can't tell us what'll happen long term. Even though we know vaping is safer than smoking, we may still find cause for concern. If you're thinking of switching to vaping, do it! That's what the experts agree. Smoking so bad for you, they all concur that vaping beats burning. There's much to learn of effects long term yet to be seen. Switch to vaping, do it! That's what the experts agree. Smoking so bad for you, they all concur that vaping beats burning. There's much to learn of effects long term yet to be seen.
I'm 56 years old and I smoked for 33 years and got up to 3 packs a day. I quit smoking using vapor products.
I smoked for well over 30 years. In 2006, I lost my wife and best friend of 18 years to lung cancer. I thought I would die with a cigarette in my hand. I have not had a cigarette in over 10 years. Today I vape banana at 1.5. Vaping saved my life.
Hi, my name is Nick Orlando. I'm happy to say I'm an ex-smoker for 12 years. I use flavored vapor products. Caramel, bourbon, custard.
My name is Ryan Benford. I live in Northport, Alabama. I'm 41 years old. I smoked for 23 years, and I quit smoking using vapor products.
I have helped multiple family members, friends, relatives quit smoking by using vapor products. Science has proven that vapor products are at least 95 to 97% safer than smoking. Please stop the lies.